Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining me this morning. I am joined by Vero of the Chamber of Commerce, as well as if you don't mind sharing your camera, I would love to see your faces. Always more fun to be able to actually see who we're speaking to. I actually teach quite a bit virtually, and it's always so much better when a much more engaging experience when we're able to see who we're speaking to and not just be speaking to a blank screen. So welcome. I see that we have 3 participants. We're such a small group. This is going to be very informal, very casual, but we will touch on the topic at hand. You should currently be seeing my screen. I just want to get a thumbs up if you are seeing my screen. Awesome. Seeing the presentation. Perfect. So before we get started, I would love for us to go around the room and introduce ourselves. So I'll get started, basically looking for who are you, which organization are you with, and what are you hoping to get out of today's presentation? So I am Lauriane Duguay. I am the owner of the People Person HR Growth Solutions, which is essentially a organizational excellence firm that offers a number of services, including human resource services, the more transactional, as well as the higher level strategic HR services, conflict resolution services, project management, as well as professional coaching. So we do have quite a wide range of services, but essentially we are there to support employers in grooming their teams into becoming high performing teams. So that is me in a nutshell. I'm located here in Kapuskasing. So I see Sylvie, who's kindly shared her camera. So if you don't mind, Sylvie, if you want to unmute yourself, I would love to hear more about who you are and where you work.
Yeah, sure. Hi. Good morning. My name is Sylvie Lamotte. I am the program manager at Link North, so located at the Timmins Economic Development Corporation. So we support entrepreneurs and small businesses with consultation services. We have a boost funding program, and we also host a variety of workshops. So I wanted to tune in today just to, get a feel for what this presentation is. It's piqued my my interest. So here, and then wanted to I'm also kind of coming in on these sessions for Small Business Week, looking to gain information about what's out there for potentially some of our clients as well. So
that's awesome. I love it. So as that conduit, knowing what you can refer folks to and what is available out there, I love it. Just as an FYI, I was asked to present today specifically in reference to the different legislated leaves that employers should be aware of for their employees, as well as the different policies and procedures, which are mandatory, which are the need to have versus which are the, nice to have. So that's basically what we're going to be covering today, but not to say, since we are such a small group, I suspect we'll finish way before an hour. So if we have any other HR related questions, I'll gladly address any and all of those as well. So thank you and welcome, Sylvie. Notice in the participant bar that we also have Brigitte Bedo.
Bonjour, Lauriane. I work with Norris Claybell. I've been wanting to take one of your sessions for a long time to see what it's all about. And that's about it. I'm interested in everything you have to say today.
Awesome. I suspect the sessions you're referring to have to do with everything DISC, which is one of the ones that have been most in demand. And we're not necessarily going to touch on that today. However, again, if we have time at the end, I'll gladly give you an insight into what that program is all about and what those kinds of tools, what kind of power they can offer an organization in terms of really opening up those lines of communication within a team and helping your team, giving them the tools they need to be able to better understand the needs and preferences of one another. So awesome. Thanks for joining us, Brigitte. Welcome.
Thank you.
Last but not least, I've got Trista.
Hello, I'm Trista Breton from the Smooth Rock Falls Economic Development Corporation. My job is kind of a Jill of all trades. Our mandate is to do local programs, events, but one of the things that we focus on too is helping other nonprofit organizations. So attending these sessions, I'm hoping to just get educated on what's around us, what's accessible for even my organization or how I can help other people get connected with the services that we have here locally. So that's it.
Awesome. Awesome. Welcome, Trista. And I said last but not least, but I'll absolutely let Vero introduce herself as well. I'm so sorry.
Bonjour. Is it okay if I speak in French?
Oui,
Donc,
moi, je peux-
donc moi, c'est Véronique Bergeron et je suis la interne à la Chambre des commerces de Kapuskasing. Puis je m'occupe d'organiser les événements, les webinaires, puis aussi de faire du marketing.
Bienvenue. Alors, on commence, sorry, switch to French. That's such a northern thing to do there. But if we want to get started with, I'm asking you guys a question. So which policies, when you think about policies that employers must have, are you aware, I'm just going to put it out there, what are policies that you think that every employer in Ontario legally must have? I see Sylvie, she looks like she's looking for her unmute button. I'm not sure. No?
I'm thinking really hard. I studied human resources in BC about 10, 15 years ago, and I'm like trying to go back to that time and think about, you know, the policies and some of the stuff I've studied, but I'm thinking maybe you're looking at stuff like probably kind of like your safety kind of stuff.
Absolutely. And I see that Trista also mentioned that in the chat. So the health and safety policy, absolutely.
I don't know if there would be like a leave policy in terms, well, it says it in your presentation, but like sick leave kind of stuff, recruitment, harassment. So absolutely, all those that you've mentioned, all important policies in terms of the mandatory ones. The last one you touched on, certainly the workplace health and safety, and a newly added one is definitely the COVID-19 safety policy that Trista mentioned also in the chat. So thank you, Sylvie, for chiming in. But you'll see that we're actually going to speak to everyone you mentioned, I think, in the presentation. So good job on that. So the four policies that every Ontario employer must have in place is number one, an accessibility policy. So that's in reference to the Accessibility for Ontario for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. So the AODA is the acronym used for that often. And that actually, there's quite a wide variety of different sub policies you want, or different measures you need to have in place to make sure that you are compliant to that act. But the number and kind of disability related policies or measures that you need to take really depend on the size of the employer. So it's super important to kind of, you know, keep informed and find out what you do need to have. For example, there are employers who actually have to have a formal plan that's submitted in writing and submitted to confirm that they are indeed compliant. But smaller employers that have less than 20 employees won't necessarily have to actually go that extra step of submitting it for approval and whatnot. And less than 5 employees actually won't even have to have it in writing. They just need to have it in place. And then there's that whole other kind of tangent that derives from this as well, in terms of providing accessible customer service. So ensuring that your customers, if you have a front-facing business and you've got customers coming on site, ensuring that you're offering a fully inclusive and accessible experience to those customers. So that is your accessibility policy. Your pay equity plan, again, that's more for employers with 10 employees or more. And essentially, what you need to do is to ensure that you're offering equitable employment and wages to both men and women across the board, and that you're not creating an inequity through your payroll processes, or your payroll, your wages, your wage rates. Then there's, of course, the safety piece that we did allude to, the workplace health and safety policy. We are going to talk a bit more about that in the next slide, but certainly it's important to have one in place.
There are a number of workplace health and safety measures that need to be taken as well that I'm sure most of you are familiar with, but we will kind of revise it really quickly. And finally, the workplace violence and harassment policy, which was revised in 2018 with Bill 168. Extremely important to have that in place, to communicate it to your employees regularly so they are aware what their rights are in reference to this act and to the Bill 168 laws and regulations. So those are the 4 that are mandatory. So those are the ones that you absolutely have to have in place, no and ifs or buts. So ensure that you do have them in place and written in your existing organization policy and procedures manual, if you have one. If you do not have one, I strongly encourage you to have one drafted. We do offer that service, but there's a number of other organizations that also offer it. It's a super important piece of information to have, not only for ensuring that you are covered from a legal perspective in the event that you may have to terminate someone, in the event that someone comes into the workplace and they're under the influence, for example, or that you are accused or someone submits a formal complaint on being harassed in the workplace. Or having a client comes in and is violent with an employee. These are all policies that are going to cover you, of course, from that legal lens, that legal perspective, but it's also important because it provides a level of safety to your employees as well, to know that they are safe and that they're being taken care of. It communicates that you're an employer who cares to your team. And it really provides them with a bit of a user manual in the event that they do encounter some of those more gray areas of how to navigate that gray. So it's definitely an important manual to have and to ensure that your employees are aware of it. Oh, sorry, I overclicked there. So some of the recommended workplace policies, an absenteeism policy. So that's the policy which you talked about sick time earlier, Sylvie. So that's the policy that would cover, what kind of absences are allowed and under which circumstances, and what's your company practice in terms of requesting sick time, requesting time off, requesting how do they go about doing that? Make it clear. And in that policy, it should really have kind of a step-by-step and what's allowed based on perhaps tenure. So if they've been there for 6 months versus if they've been there for 17 years, what are the allowances in terms of vacation if you do offer paid vacation? If you don't offer paid vacation, a little tip of the trade is that basically in Ontario, the Employment Standards Act, the ESA, sets the minimum standard of employee rights and employer obligations. The the bare minimum standard. You're always absolutely welcome to offer beyond that standard, so more than that, but you're encouraged to offer more, but at the very least you must legally offer the minimum, which is included and documented in the Employment Standards Act of Ontario. Within your policies, these kind of nice to have policies, you need to make sure that you're referencing the ESA on a regular basis to make sure that you're at the very least in the way that you're drafting them, providing for that minimum level of rights and obligations on both your part as well as the employee's part. So these are the kinds of things that you want to be aware of. If this is a little intimidating, and I'm aware that some employers, this is the furthest things from their mind. They see this as a bureaucratic exercise, as kind of just more paperwork, and where do I have time? Don't be shy to reach out and hire a professional. There are professionals out there that'll put one together to you in like snap time. There's also a number of templates already online that you can access as well. So don't be shy to reach out, and certainly we can do those kinds of things for you. But really you're best to consult with someone professional to ensure that you're really including all of the little nuances. Perfect example, workplace harassment and violence policy. If you're not specific in terms of, number one, how are plaintiff people who are complainants, or how do they submit a complaint, a formal complaint? How do they file that? And what happens after that? And step by step, for example, I'm actually currently conducting a an investigation in reference to a harassment complaint that was submitted to an organization down south. And their complaint policy, as we're working through the investigation, we're recognizing that there's not enough detail in their policy to really provide, we're finding kind of flaws in the way it was written, in that, for example, they say they have a zero tolerance policy, but what does that mean? So for the employees who have submitted complaints, they made the assumption that that means the person in question, the aggressor, would be terminated immediately. But a zero tolerance policy just says that, you know, any behavior that meets the definition of harassment or violence will not be tolerated and will be addressed. What that addressing it looks like, that's not clear in that policy, nor is what zero tolerance means. So the clearer you can be on your policies, the more likely you are to not have any kind of gray info in your team members' minds. They really know what to expect. And managing those expectations is key, really, in terms of reducing the conflict within that organization, right? So human rights policy, intoxicants policy, and if you do have one that you had at one point in terms of alcohol and coming in intoxicated into the workplace, make sure that it's been updated to reflect the latest medical cannabis implications, as well as any prescription drugs and over-the-counter drugs. An investigations policy, again, a perfect example of that I just provided, where you're very specific on what that investigation is going to look like, who's going to be involved in the investigation. Some organizations go straight to a third-party external firm like people person. Others prefer to have implication from their organization as well as an external third party. So you may say that you want your HR person involved and you want the executive director involved and they approach the investigations as a committee to really provide that kind of 360 perspective of what's been going on and what kind of context may have led to the incident in question. A vacation policy, a privacy policy that aligns with the most current legislation in reference to privacy. Depending on the field that you work, the privacy acts that would govern that field will change. So make sure that you do look into that. And an overtime policy. So just examples of nice to have, but honestly, for example, we offer a HR manual can be as comprehensive as having policies for everything that you could think of. I believe just the table of contents can run 5 pages of every topic you could think of. If they have to telework, if they need to use company equipment, if they need to take home company equipment, if they have a cell phone that's company issued, what's the policy that governs the use of that? There's so many policies that you can actually put together. And although it looks like a bit of a bureaucratic exercise by putting that on paper, ultimately you have to look at it as really managing expectations and helping people really know what to expect and what is the expected, kind of communicating the standards of conduct, as well as the consequences for not adhering to those standards. Any questions? Again, this is super informal. Please stop me. I can't keep an eye on the chat, but if Vero or if I missed something in the chat, flag me, interrupt me. Any questions so far?
Awesome. You mentioned something about the privacy policy was gonna have changes.
Not changes, just ensuring that you do have one in place in terms of how you store your information. If you use a network, what's the password policies in terms of saving on there? If you have to gather client information, you want to reference FIPA and PIPEDA to ensure, which are the 2 acts that normally govern all organizations, to ensure that you are you're recommending and the practices that your organization uses to store information is in line with what you're allowed to keep, for example, based on those acts. So not necessarily referencing changes themselves. These acts have been in place for a number of years now.
Okay, well, thank you.
Awesome. So employers, what kind of training do you have to provide all employees? So by law in Ontario, you actually have to provide AODA training. Testing you guys right now with a quiz. What is AODA? What is AODA? What does that treat? What does that act treat? Not necessarily the definition, but just what are we talking about when we hear AODA?
Accessibility?
Accessibility, awesome, exactly. And then harassment prevention and training, as well as violence prevention and training. So even if it's a little e-learning they do online, just to understand the implications, the policy that you've developed, they read it just to make sure they're aware. You have them sign off that they've read on it and they understand the implications. It's really important to provide them that training, as well, of course, health and safety prevention and training. Okay. Oh, sorry. Postings required by law. So when I say postings, these are things that need to be actually posted in your workplace. The poster that, and all of these you can download on the appropriate site. So there's a number of safety posters that need to be posted. Number one, the health and safety at work prevention starts here poster. The what you need to know about the ESA, the Employment Standards Act, as well as the poster in case of injury, your workplace is covered by the WSIB. And again, that poster is only to be posted if you're not an organization that's exempt from WSIB coverage, which some organizations are. As well, and the famous green book, so the copy of the Occupational Health and Safety Act should be on site, again, if you are covered by WSIB. Health and safety, we referenced it earlier. A health and safety committee or representatives are required by law in Ontario. So an actual committee needs to be in place for your organization if you have 20 employees or more, with representation from management as well as from frontline workers. And then a health and safety representative at the very least must be selected and trained if your organization employs more than 5 but less than 20. So there's the math for the health and safety representatives on site. Any questions in reference to this so far? And I mean, as with anything, you're always better to go with having someone trained on site, even if you do have less than 5, because you never know when the legislation is likely to change. But also, it's never a lost thing to have some trained folks on site in the event of that there is, you know, an incident or there's a health and safety risk that occurs. You want someone who's taken the training to be able to address that risk. Moving into leaves now, we talked about the different legislated leaves. The newly announced paid infectious disease emergency leave. So what that is by law, as of, it was announced on April 29th, but it's actually retroactive to the 19th of April, just as an FYI. So if you had employees who were away and would be eligible for this, you can actually claim it back to April 19th of this year. So what it is, it provides up to 3 days of paid leave to a maximum of $200 per day based on how much they would normally make. So if they're making $16 an hour and they work 8 hours a day, and so they would normally only make 128, I want to say. I'm doing this on the fly here. Yeah, 128, not too bad. So if they would normally only make 128 per day, then you would only be eligible. They would only be eligible for 128. You pay them 128 per day, and you would request your reimbursement through WSIB for that same amount. So the leave is intended to cover any absences that are related to COVID-19. I want to add a bit of a caveat that if their contract or you already provide sick leave to your employees, then the amount that they'd be eligible for is reduced by whatever amount you already offer. So again, this notion that the ESA sets out the bare minimum, but if you're already offering a week of sick time, people can claim up to a week of sick time, then they wouldn't be eligible for this benefit at all. Another kind of thing that you want to note is we are not allowed to request a doctor's note for this type of sick time. and examples of what that can cover: their sick time, going for a COVID-19 test, staying home waiting for the results of a COVID-19 test, being sick with COVID-19 themselves, or having to care for someone who has to go for a COVID-19 test or has symptoms and can't go to school, experiencing a side effect from the COVID-19 vaccination. Again, all eligible, but know that you can also not claim this benefit at the same time that you would be claiming the federal Canadian Recovery Sickness Benefit. So again, kind of weighing out your options before you do claim it as an employee, but as an employer, recognizing that it's your duty to inform folks of their rights and what they're able to claim, and to make sure that they're not shooting themselves in the foot per se. If they do try to claim this and they're already on the other federal benefit, they're likely going to incur a double payment or an overpayment with either of the two benefits. Any questions in reference to this one? In terms of requesting reimbursement, the information on the how that happens, they know so far, and they're able to communicate that it's through the WSIB that you'll be requesting, because that agency's been assigned the administration of this fund. But to say the how you apply is to be continued. Questions on that? Awesome.
I have, sorry, just a question. So the three days of employee sick time, that's the new Ontario legislation, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so as the employer, you're required to pay that to the employee, and then you would go to the government for the reimbursement for that, correct?
Go, yeah, to the workplace safety insurance.
Okay, sounds good.
Awesome.
Thank you.
And that's the part that I was saying, the how you get reimbursed and what's the process for that, what's the paperwork. It's a to be continued. I think it's so new, right? It came out, it was announced 29th.
Yeah, as per government stuff, we'll know in a few months how that all trickles down, right?
Yes, except as a government worker for 21 years, I'll keep my comments on that one. I actually just took a year leave in December, so my full-time position is with government, so I will refrain comments on that one, but certainly. So now we're getting into what are some of the legislated leaves that are allowed there, that folks are allowed to. And this is where it gets pretty gray, and I'm hoping to be able to make it a bit more black and white for you guys today to really understand the little nuances, but please do not be shy to interrupt me. So one of the things I start with saying is this is not paid leave. What it is, as I mentioned, the ESA sets out that minimum standards of employment for most employees in Ontario workplaces. But this is what it does entail, is that these are the kinds of leave that you cannot be fired or punished in any way for taking or planning to take one of these types of leaves. So when we hear job protected, we really are saying that you're entitled to return to your job in the same position as when you left for leave. Now, when you do return, if that position is no longer a position with that organization, that could happen, then the employer must, by law, offer you a comparable position in terms of skills, duties, pay, and benefits. Your benefits, length of service, and seniority while you're on one of these leaves will actually continue to accrue as well. They're not allowed to kind of suspend accrual of those benefits while you're away on these legislated leaves. We are good with that. Everyone understands? So here are a number of those leaves that I just referenced. We will deep dive into some of them. Some of them are pretty straightforward. We know that a reservist goes away to do work with our Canadian Reserves, the organ donor. It's pretty self-explanatory. Jury duty, pregnancy and parental. We're not going to cover them, but if you do have questions about it, then we can talk about it. And then time off just to go to vote. So what we are going to deep dive a bit more into is these five first leaves. So just bear with me here. So who is entitled to all these leaves? You're entitled to all these unpaid leaves, whether part-time, full-time, on a contract or a permanent basis, And if you're working for an employee who is subject to the an employer, sorry, who's subject to the ESA. So there are actually some federal jurisdiction employers, banks are actually one of them, that they're not governed by the ESA. They are governed by a parallel federal governing body and legislation. But if you are working for an organization that is subject to the ESA and covered by the ESA, then you're certainly entitled to these leaves. While they're unpaid leaves, you can actually also access EI benefits, whether they be sick benefits, maternity, parental, or regular EI benefits while you're on any of these leaves. Just a bit of a specification here. For the purpose of some of the leaves we're going to talk about in the next slide, where it's family, we hear the word family. Here is who is considered family as per the ESA. This is what the ESA, this is the relationships that the ESA considers family. I'll leave that there just to, I know there's a lot of verbiage on there, but basically it really provides, again, that definition of what do we, who do we deem family and who do we not deem family for the purpose of these leaves. So the types of emergency leaves, first one, personal emergency leave. So that leave specifically is intended to address a personal illness that you're encountering, injury or medical emergency, or to address the death, illness, injury, or medical emergency of a family member. You can actually take up to 10 days off in every 12-month period. So it renews every 12 months. They don't need to be consecutive, but if you take just a half day, it's still considered a 1 day for the purpose of this leave. And it's only accessible to Ontarians that are employed by a company or business that actually have more than 50 employees. So just as an FYI, if the organization that would have more than 50 employees don't offer paid sick leave or emergency leave, then you would be entitled to these days. For all the other leaves, anyone is entitled to them, regardless of the size of the organization. So family caregiver leave, that leave is really to allow you to care for a family member. It's in the very name. And what I said earlier on the previous slide, all the definition of the family members are on that slide, and they're available also on the ESA website. So it's for a family member that would have a serious medical condition for up to 8 weeks in a 12-month period. And with that other leave, if you only take 2 or 3 days in a week, that's still considered 1 week for that 12-month period. And it does actually require a medical certificate from a medical professional stating that a family member has a serious medical condition that you need to stop working to care for them for. Does not need to specify the medical condition at all, just needs to have that kind of verbiage saying that yes, there is a serious medical condition and that you need to provide care. The family medical leave allows you to care for a medical condition with a significant risk of dying. A medical condition that someone may have that they have a serious risk of dying within 6 months. So the little nuance between the caregiver and the family medical leave is really where there's that risk of dying. You can take up to 8 weeks in a half year for that leave. Again, half year being relative to that 6 months. So if you had someone, for example, who's diagnosed with cancer and you're aware that there's not much they can do, that they're likely going to, it's a terminal cancer, then you would be eligible for this leave to stop working to be able to support them and to help them. But again, this is unpaid leave. It's job protected leave. So you can stop work to care for them and you must have a job to go back to. The next one, critical ill childcare leave. So for parents whose child's health has significantly changed for the worse or whose life is at risk actually because of illness or injury, the child can actually, for that one, can be adopted, biological, adopted, step or foster child, but must be under the age of 18. So there's that, again, that little nuance of they need to be under 18. And you can get up to 37 weeks in a 1 year, 52-week period. And that, again, don't have to be taken consecutively and do require a certificate. Really, all of these leaves from family through to critically ill as well as the next one actually, do require that professional medical certificate. The last one we don't really want to think about, and I hope that no one ever has to take, is for crime-related death or disappearance leave for employees that are facing, you know, the devastating tragedy of losing their child or of their child disappearing. To qualify, they must have been with their employer for a minimum of 6 months prior to the actual tragedy occurring. So the death or the disappearance. And then you're entitled to 104 weeks, which is actually 2 years of job protected leave for a death, and 52 weeks for a disappearance of a child. So that is the types of legislated emergency leaves that job protected legislated emergency leaves that you are entitled to in Ontario. Any questions in reference to the leaves? No. So just want to touch briefly on some of the changes that have occurred on May 29th. Oh, sorry, Sylvie, did you have a question? I seen you come on briefly.
No, sorry, I hit some keys by accident. Go ahead.
Hey, that's okay. That's awesome. That's fine. So on May 29th, 2020, so last May, the government made a regulation under the ESA in response to COVID-19. The rules and regulation that applied during the COVID-19 period, which initially was set to end much earlier, but has now been extended until July 3rd, 2021. So hence why I'm kind of going to touch on it really quick, but that period as of now is set to end on July 3rd, 2021. And basically the major changes is that during this period, a non-unionized employee is deemed on a job protected infectious disease emergency leave if their employer has temporarily reduced or eliminated their hours, where under normal ESA rules, there may be consequences in reference to if once you do reduce, you significantly reduce an employee's hours, then, you know, that may be grounds for, may be construed as constructive dismissal, and there's all kinds of severance and termination kind of innuendos that come along with that. For the period up until July 3rd, again, they're deemed to be on a job protected infectious disease emergency leave. That's what they're calling that leave. And then beginning on July 4th, so it'll be business as usual. The ESA's regular rules around constructive dismissal and temporary layoff will resume. So that means that a significant reduction or elimination, for example, of an employee's hours of work or wages may be considered a constructive dismissal, even if it was done for reasons related to the COVID-19 after July 4th, after July 3rd. As well as for temporary layoffs, the rules that govern kind of that kind of a working relationship in that situation. For practical purpose, an employee's temporary layoff clock resets on July 4th, and that's when they are privy to the regular ESA rules as of that date. That's pretty much all I wanted to cover, only because that's what I was asked to cover. However, and I'm seeing you guys can't even see my email on here, nor my website. That's horrible. I'll make sure to change that before I do share the presentation. I can definitely share the presentation with everyone if you're interested. But regardless, I'll be sharing it, but I just want to take this time now. We've got a good 20 minutes left. Wondering if there are any questions or any HR conundrums that I can help you guys kind of troubleshoot. Maybe from what I can see, we've got quite a few folks on the call here that are really kind of that conduit between, and you provide information to clients. So maybe there's information that you tend to you're asked for on a regular basis and really not sure how to kind of direct your folks accordingly. Super open to any conversation at this point.
I guess the only major HR issues that I find my clients have is in terms of recruitment and retention, right? And finding, of course, we're up north. almost everybody's dealing with that, like, how do I find skilled labor? And then once I find them, how do I keep them? That seems to be the most alarming issues that I'm facing with my clients.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's a challenge that if you look at, even from a demographic perspective, is only going to get worse over time. So really, it's about being proactive. It's becoming that employer of choice. And how do you become that employer of choice? What kind of low cost benefits can you offer your employee? When I say benefits, it's not necessarily talking about offering them actual, pension and actual paid benefits. There are a number of things that you can do, and you can offer employees that would actually increase your retention rates as well. Being more flexible, absolutely. And some of the things that we do, if you look, it's gonna look like a plug, but it's not. It's really intended. I have a whole page on my website dedicated to, sorry, I didn't want to stop that, dedicated specifically to, let me just get here. I need to figure out which one I want to share with you here. I'm just going to move it over here. Whole page on exactly what I was referencing, becoming that employer of choice. Okay, so how do you become is you work your workplace culture, right? So under your workplace culture effectiveness, you'll notice in terms of services that we offer is really about that. It touches on how do you become, what are the things you need to be thinking about if you want to become that employee of choice. So we've got employee engagement strategy. So how do you create a work environment that people want to show up for? What are the drivers of engagement? And I do have an entire workshop on this, and it's literally about those 9 drivers. They need to know that there's room to grow within the organization. So how are you communicating that ability to grow, that potential within the company? And some of them, growing looks very differently for one person to the next. So growing for one person might actually mean just expanding their skill set, where for another person, they actually would love to one day become management or fall into a more leadership role. So it's really understanding and having the processes in place that allow you to ask those questions and ask them how they would like to grow in a way that's meaningful to them, right? So again, that's my segue into the second point, that performance management process. How do you communicate expectations? How do you have those conversations with them and talk about how they want to grow, but also what do they feel they're being challenged with? How can you support them more in terms of achieving their day-to-day work? What's missing from their repertoire of tools and resources? How can you better support them? Maybe even allow them the opportunity to contribute to the broader goals of the organization. So what do you want to achieve for our organization? Now, what do you think we're not doing that we could be doing? And tapping into that amazing potential bank of knowledge that your frontline people have, right? And how do you engage them in those conversations? Certainly through having a really fine-tuned performance management process where you're meeting with them on an annual basis to talk about the broader goals of the organization. Because another engagement driver is about helping the employee and communicating to the employees, to help them see how they're part of a bigger picture. They're not just a number, they're not just an employee. The work you do, although you think it's the most mundane work, it's actually key to the work of everyone else in this organization and in the achievement of our mission, of our vision. So how do you communicate that? Again, it's at that performance management process step, right? Change management, how do you help them roll out change and manage change? So how do you get them to that agility level where they're okay, they're resilient when you can implement change? And it's actually, you create a culture that encourages change, because with change comes innovation. But to come back to what I alluded to earlier when I was talking to Brigitte Benoit on the Everything Disc, one of the big kind of aha moments that folks have through my Everything Disc sessions is that the different styles of personality manage change quite differently and react to change differently. So as a leadership in an organization, as an employer, ensuring that your team has the tools to recognize the preferences and the needs of each different style and to approach change, and you change your approach depending on the style of those employees, right? Or at least to develop a change management strategy that addresses all needs. It's communicated several ways, gives people time those who require more time to adapt, gives them that ability to kind of think about the change coming and prepare themselves mentally. Those who crave change, get them involved in actually the implementation of that strategy. So much you can do with that kind of stuff. So revising your organizational structure. We know that the newer generations want a flatter organization. They're not huge on hierarchy. They don't want 17 levels of approval, 17 levels of management. They need to know that they're a part of the organization, and it should be a more collaborative approach to management, whereas before it was more authoritarian that was craved, right? So just understanding that evolution in terms of our workers and understanding how to structure your business in a way that speaks to those needs, right? Training and development and workshop facilitation, it's on there, but just again, just ensuring that you're training them, another engagement driver, knowing that they want to show up for the employer that invests in them and invests in their expansion of skills, but also invest in making sure they've got the tools they need to do the work they're supposed to be doing. The team building, of course, and then everything DISC. So just, I brought you here just to talk about, like, I brought you to that page just so that you understand that these concepts are actually how you become that employer of choice, that employer that'll increase your retention rates, that employer onboarding and orientation. We heard recruitment earlier. Once you get them in the door, how you get them in the door and how you get them to work is crucial in terms of fueling retention. Because if you're setting them up for failure, you'll be losing them before the 3-month mark. If you're setting them up for success, you're providing them a job shadow opportunity or a realistic job preview even before they start, where they can come in and actually spend a day seeing what the job's about. You know, it's going to be, we're at the point already actually for the more skilled positions where you almost need to market yourself to these prospective job searchers. So you market yourselves by bringing them in. Come on in, let's have a day. I seen at one point, I remember seeing it was actually with high school students, but a large construction company had them all come in and spend the day with different departments in that construction company. What a wonderful way of marketing yourself to your future job pool of candidates, but also giving them a realistic experience of what it's like to work in that industry, right? So developing little processes like that to really market yourself to those prospective workers, but then when you do get them in the door, ensuring that you're providing them with that very structured and formal onboarding and orientation process to make sure that you're setting them up for success in that position, but also developing that kind of follow through, that next point check-in. Once they're past that 3-month mark, how are you going to continue to check in and get the pulse of how they're going and how they're enjoying their work? Developing those kinds of processes will certainly increase your retention rates. I know that was a lot of information, Sylvie, but just
this is definitely really good. Thank you for that, Lori-Ann. You mentioned this DISC program or workshop that you offer. Can you speak to that a little bit more?
How about, we do have time. How about I show you guys a video on what is DISC? And I'll just show you guys the introduction. It's actually, we have 9 different tools that we offer for prospective companies. Everything from the one I'll show you the intro to is really about just what is DISC. That's the workplace version, which is your baseline version, right? And then you can also do your management version. So specifically for management, based on your styles, your preferences, your tendencies, you know, what are you likely to, how are you likely to delegate and direct? But how does that resonate with the 4 different styles that are likely on your team? How do you adapt your approach in directing and delegating to make sure you're getting full uptake from your staff and you're able to drive them in a way that is meaningful to them? So there's a ton of different ones here. I'll just move this over here. So you see, these are all the DISC products that we do offer: management, work of leaders. We even have one for sales, which is phenomenal. It's about, you know, what are the 4 selling styles? And it actually provides, you take an assessment online, and then it provides you with a profile, which is between 20 and 27 pages, which is basically the user manual to you. It's a highly, highly accurate and reliable assessment tool that'll say, this is your, so say you're doing the sales, this is your selling style, this is your general personality style, which makes you sell and approach selling this way. But here are the 4 buying styles. And then you get 3 pages on how to be more productive, and how to get the sales pitch, how to pitch the sales to get the sale every time based on your 4 buying styles. And how do you identify the buying style of each customer? How quickly can you identify? Same concept with workplace, which I'll show you the video in a minute. So that workplace version of the tools is really about how do you understand the needs and preferences of your coworkers, and how do you change your approach to really optimize your interaction every time with your coworkers? How do you manage conflict with different styles? And how can you read which style your coworkers are? The management really is in reference to delegation, direction, motivating your team, and developing your team, how each style prefers to be developed. And then we also have a work of leaders, which is for board of directors. It's a tool for board of directors to help develop the vision, the mission, and the values of that, the organization for which they're assigned a board for. The 363 is actually a 360 evaluation for leadership. So if a manager, an ED, wants to know how they're doing, then we send the profile to their employees, their colleagues, as well as their bosses, and they get a real 360 assessment of their performance and how they are coming off as a leader. And then the Agile EQ is emotional intelligence. It's a newly launched emotional intelligence profile that'll give you your level of emotional intelligence, as well as 20 pages of strategies to increase it based on your assessment. So if we go into workplace, go into my videos, and then just go into, I'll just make sure that I am sharing with audio. Écran numéro 2. Voilà. And we will just do this.
What if people had their needs written all over them? If you knew that this person wanted more independence, and that person wanted a bit more reassurance, would it change the way you work together? Would it make your job easier? Yeah, it probably would. But that's not the real world. Or is it? Maybe if you had the right decoder, everyone's needs would be a lot more obvious. It would be clear how to work more effectively together, to be more productive, more satisfied. All you would need is a tool to help you understand where people are coming from. This is DISC, your decoder. It gives you a way to quickly understand the needs and priorities of the people around you. It describes 4 basic styles: D, I, S, and C. Here's how it works. First, everyone has a dot. That dot tells you your DISC style. For instance, if you have a D, or dominant style, you probably drive toward results, insist on immediate action, and challenge the status quo. Most likely, other people with the D style share your priorities, even though you might butt heads from time to time. Different styles may find this same D approach to be blunt, intimidating, or insensitive. If you have an I, or influence style, you probably approach work with enthusiasm, enjoy collaboration, and take quick action. Others with the I style probably find your energy exciting, even if the two of you are a little too optimistic at times. Different styles may find this sort of liveliness and fast pace to be sloppy or reckless. Or you may have an S, or steadiness style, which means you like to support people, maintain stability, and enjoy collaboration. People with the S style will probably appreciate your patient and easygoing nature, even if that means there's little sense of urgency. Different styles might see you as overly accommodating or indecisive. And finally, if you have a C, or conscientiousness style, you probably focus on accuracy. Use your logic to challenge ideas and seek stability to ensure consistent outcomes. Others with the C style will like that you prioritize getting things right, even if the two of you can get bogged down in analysis. But for people with different styles, this cautious pace may feel dry, sapping their natural energy. Now, in the real world, it's not always that simple. Your dot can be between two styles, such as in the area between I and S, and you can have 4 or even 5 priorities. For example, in addition to collaboration, enthusiasm, and support, you might also share the priority of accuracy with your C coworkers. The point is, even though you need to recognize your own DISC style, you also need to know where the people you work with are coming from. Whether you're simply connecting with others, solving problems, or working through conflict, you'll have to stretch from time to time. And using DISC as a guide, you'll have a better sense of when and why that sort of adapting is so crucial to not only your success, but the success of everyone in your workplace.
There you go. So that's DISC. Sylvie, was that helpful?
Yes, it was. Thanks for showing us that video. So when you do DISC workshops, you go into workplaces and do the assessment and talk about each person's style. Is that the idea?
So what happens is they do the assessment online, and pre-COVID, yes, we make it a workshop, ranging from 3 hours to a full day, depending on the product and the profile they've done. And actually what we do is during the workshop, we deep dive into their profile, but I won't kind of say, okay, Sylvie, I want you to tell me in front of everyone what your profile says that you're like here at all. But rather it's more about, I purposely put people together from different styles to help you. And then we have breakout rooms, and even virtually, I've offered it several times virtually. I send you off into breakout rooms, and then you've got assigned questions that you answer based on your style and how would you likely react to that, and help the others understand that perspective. So again, just reinforcing, oh my God, we've been working together, and that person at the meeting always asking all these questions isn't just because she likes to ask a bunch of questions or questions doesn't have any confidence that I'm able to do what I want to do, but it's because they're of a style that requires me to present information in a logical way. So if my style went all over the map in presenting my data or my information, I've lost them, and they're just trying to make sense of it from their perspective, right? So to understand that and to reframe the way that you view that person, and to the next time say, hey, so this is what I'm proposing, and presenting it in a very logical order to speak to your style, game changing in terms of productivity, in terms of performance. So we spend the day really deep diving and understanding what this means, but also how to be more productive with other styles. And I teach them how to read other styles on the fly. Like if the person's not done it, there is people reading skills, again, through a positive lens of just better understanding their needs and preferences. There's 2 questions you ask to figure out what style they are, pretty much. Yeah, just a great tool in terms of, fostering collaboration, team building, helping your team work more cohesively together, regardless of which styles are on your team. But also in terms of recruitment, knowing that if you're heavily weighted in a certain style, then you may want to tailor your questions of your interview to target specific styles. So if you've got the big idea generators and you've got the innovators, you may want to structure your interview questions to go and get the more process analytical types, to ensure that we're getting these big ideas, but not a lot are coming to fruition. We need the people back here driving that kind of process forward, but having taken the time to think of all the steps required. Yeah. So that's
Makes
it.
sense. I have one more question, Lauriane, if I can, before we close off.
Yeah.
I feel like I have a lot of questions today, but do you offer any of your workshops in French?
100%.
Okay, thanks.
Actually, I'll be honest, I think the past 5 have been in French entirely. And actually, you remind me, Collège Boréal, I partnered with Collège Boréal, and we're launching a program. And if you're interested, it's offered virtually, so anyone from the province can take it. And it's going to be called Grooming Your Next Supervisor. It is a 8-week program for people who have identified a high potential employee or even a new manager that could use, that deeper dive training on how to manage people. And they're going to be doing the Everything Disc Management through that program. It's going to be 3 hours a day, once a week in the evening, to not disrupt the operations of organizations. We are taking 16 people in French and 16 people in English. It is starting on May 25th, I want to say. Yeah, the Tuesday will be the English session, the Wednesday will be the French session. Tuesday and the Wednesday night will be the French session. I know our French session already, I believe, has several people registered for it, but it's really about 8 weeks. But what's beautiful about it, giving them everything from courageous conversations to how to understand different styles on your team, how to communicate strategically, written, oral, but also how to go back, figure out what kind of manager you want to be. And what does that look like? And how does that align with your organization's values and vision? So they're going to get homework every week that they're bringing back to the organization. So the organization also benefits because they get kind of the homework impact, right? So what is the organization's vision? Now you've got an employee who's ensuring that she's keeping that in mind when she's figuring out what she wants to look like as a manager, or how she wants to approach her management. But then later on, when we talk about team building, they're going to go back and do a team building with your organization. They're going to have an entire toolkit to proceed with team building with that organization. So it's crazy the amount of stuff that we're going to cover, but that's launching at the end of the month in May as well. And to register, they contact Collège Boréal.
OK. Collège Boréal à Timmins or
Sébastien Lessard.
OK, Sébastien.
C'est Seb qui s'occupe de lui, puis son nouvel employé Zachary Dorval s'occupe de faire les inscriptions. Fait que je suis certaine que si tu communiques avec le Collège Boréal ici même à Timmins, je veux dire, ils vont pouvoir te brancher.
OK, merci. Je connais Seb, so je vais contacter. C'est bon, merci.
Parfait, Sylvie. Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres questions? Any other questions?
I actually did have a question.
Awesome.
When it goes to like workplace health and safety policies and that, I wondered, does that apply to nonprofit organizations who have no staff? So like you have big groups of people who are volunteering.
That's a really great question. I would say that if you've got folks, whether they're paid or unpaid, it should apply if they are, they're all working for the same organization. It's voluntary, but they're still considered kind of workers. So to really deep dive into that, we would have to really, honestly, I'd love to get back to you on that, Trista. I can provide you more information, but it has to do with the definition of a worker and whether or not they would be covered by the Occupational Health and Safety Act. That's where, did you want me to get back to you on that?
Yeah, please, because I actually noticed there's a lot of organizations and you have the same volunteers. They're volunteering in all these different organizations, and they're stretching themselves thin. And I don't think that any of them are really meeting, what we should be doing. Like even with my own organization, I'm a Jill of all trades. So like I'm the bookkeeper, the meetings, I got to do all these things. And when it comes to policies, it's so intimidating that I'm not really doing anything because I don't know what to do, how to start, and it's stressful.
Yeah, no, certainly. That does make sense. And I mean, to where to start, your best bet, honestly, if you are already a Jill of all trades, I would suggest kind of just farming that out. Just get a policy and procedures manual done for you. It can be done like within a week, and you're covered for every, policy that you could think of. And then you have it. It's there. It's on paper. If ever you had any issues with MOL, you could, show them, provide evidence that you do have policies in place.
Great, thank you.
But I will get back to you for the nonprofit, and you're absolutely right. I mean, they are stretched thin, and the kind of lowest priority is always these kinds of bureaucratic exercises, but unfortunately, they're the ones that protect them. And it's beautiful if they never have to use them, awesome. But at the very least, if they do have an incident and they need to reference them, then at least they'll have them in place, right? Any other questions?
Lorianne, I don't have a question, but I'm just in response to Trista. I think if she would contact Linda Simpchism, She has a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge, especially with policies, that she'd be able to help you out.
Awesome. That's the beauty of these networking opportunities, right? Just to kind of make those connections. So Trista, how about we go this way then? Can you contact Linda first? And then if you find you still have kind of some questions, just reach out to me.
Absolutely.
Awesome. And you're more than welcome to reach out on LinkedIn as well. I am on there. And I noticed Sylvia actually came to request. That's perfect. Love growing my network and growing our connections. So it kind of gives you that in for if you do have questions down the line as well. And through my website. Well, thank you for staying past 11. It's 11:07. Thank you so much. You think of something after the fact, don't be shy. As a parting request, if you could in the chat, one word for how you found the session today. That would be great. And other than that, thank you. And I wish you a great remainder of the day.
Well, thank you, Lorianne.
Merci, Brigitte.